Okay, in this video we're going to look at Yaakov's behavior from a moral or ethical perspective. Until now, we've had some videos where we discussed what Rivka and Yaakov did, we discussed what it accomplished in terms of the brachot. Now we're going to take a step back and say, okay, we understand what they did, how they deceived Yitzchak, we understand how Yitzchak eventually came to see things their way, but we have to ask ourselves, does that mean they did the right thing or not? So, perhaps the strongest argument within the Psukim for arguing that they did the right thing is that, after the fact, Yitzchak seems to agree with what Rivka and Yaakov did. As we saw in the previous video, after this is all said and done, when Yitzchak sends Yaakov away, he gives him the Birkat Avraham. Right? So Yitzchak does seem to eventually acknowledge that Yaakov was more worthy than Esav, and that Yaakov should not only be the leader, but the one to carry on the covenant of Abraham exclusively. However, one could still question whether they did the right thing, because perhaps they could have achieved that same goal in a different way. Right? Perhaps, for example, they could have spoken to Yitzchak and simply explained to him that Yaakov already bought the birthright, and that Esav is married to these horrible women. Maybe they didn't have to deceive him. For that matter, maybe, and this is something that you saw in the article I had you read from Rav Yair Khan, he says maybe there are times where even though we know Hashem wants something to work out a certain way, maybe we can't violate our ethics and values to accomplish that, and we should instead say, we're going to live our lives according to our values, and it's up to Hashem to make it happen. So maybe over here, if we apply that, even though Rivka believed, based on her prophecy of Rav Yavod Sa'ir, that Esav should ultimately serve Yaakov, and Yaakov should be the leader, Yaakov should carry on the family's religious legacy, maybe that does not give her a license to deceive Yitzchak in order to make it happen. Maybe she should say, look, I'll sit back. If Esav steals the bracha now, I trust that somehow Hashem will do something later to make it work out, whether that means that Esav on his own will decide he doesn't want it later, or eventually it'll come out on its own that Yaakov bought the Bechorah and they'll transfer the bracha. Somehow God will make it work out. And so, even if one believes that Yaakov and Rivka are correct to want Yaakov to get the bracha, and even if we see that in the end, the method they use worked because Yaakov got the bracha, and even Yitzchak acknowledged that eventually, maybe nevertheless, they didn't make the right decision because they could have achieved those same good goals in a less problematic way. So, we saw a range of approaches here. One approach is to say that Yaakov and Rivka didn't really do anything that dishonest. If you think that Yaakov didn't lie, then the reason you're trying to show he didn't lie is to show that you think he did the right thing. So we see this in Rashi in a couple of places here. First of all, when Yaakov comes in, the most explicit lie he seems to tell is when he says, Anochi Esav Bechorecha. Comes in and he says to Yitzchak, Anochi Esav Bechorecha. Most people would probably translate that as, I am Esav, your firstborn, which would be a lie, right? Asiti kasher dibarta elai, I did what you told me. What Yitzchak told Esav to do was to go hunt him some food. And so again, if Yaakov's saying, I'm Esav, your firstborn, and I did that, that would seem to be a lie. But Rashi says, not so fast. Says Rashi, if we break up the word right, Anochi Esav Bechorecha, we could punctuate that, Anochi, I am, pause. Or in English you might say, it is I, right? It is I, pause. Esav is your firstborn. So what does Yaakov mean by that? It is I, Anochi, Hamevi lecha, right? I'm the one bringing you food. Yitzchak had asked, who is this? Mi ata beni, who are you, my son? So Yaakov says, it is I. Now that's not a lie, because Yaakov is one of his sons. So Yaakov says, it is I. That's true. And then he adds on, Esav bechorecha, Esav is your son. And so according to Rashi, what Yaakov said is not technically a lie. And some of you pointed out in class, it still feels like what we call a white lie. It still feels deceptive, because the whole reason he phrased it this way is so that Yitzchak would take it to mean that he is Esav. But the fact that Rashi is trying to make it technically not be a lie is because it's important to Rashi that Yaakov, to justify Yaakov here, Rashi feels that Yaakov did the right thing. So he's trying to say part of why he feels Yaakov did the right thing is that Yaakov did not technically lie. So Rashi would answer our questions from the beginning as saying that Yaakov did not lie, and that what Yaakov did was ethical. Now, later in the story, you might say, wait a minute, how could he say he didn't lie? But Yitzchak himself says afterwards, when Esav comes in, and Esav wants to know, hey, where's my bracha? Yitzchak says, Ba achicha b'mirma ve'ikach birchatecha. Your brother came in through mirma, and he took your bracha. Now, I always thought the word mirma means to be dishonest, to cheat. In dictionaries, it often uses the word treachery. That's a pretty harsh word, to betray someone. But Rashi says, no, that's not what it means. Yitzchak is actually kind of admiring Yaakov's wisdom here. He's saying Yaakov came in, b'mirma, b'chochma. He came in a wise way. You got to admire Yaakov. He was so smart, he figured out a way, according to Rashi, to say, it is I am who I am, and Esav is your firstborn. Yaakov found a way to somehow get this bracha without actually doing anything that's technically dishonest. And so Yaakov acted b'chochma. We studied this as Rashi's approach, but Rashi's not the only one who says this. And so if you look back to Onkelos is much older than Rashi, right? Targum Onkelos is, done by this character Onkelos who lives in the time of Chazal, right? So Onkelos is much older than Rashi, hundreds of years earlier. Onkelos translated the Torah into Aramaic, and Ba achicha b'mirma, he translates as Al achuch b'chachma. Al just means like bo in Hebrew, to come. Achuch, your brother, like achicha in Hebrew. And mirma, says Onkelos, means chachma. So it's not just Rashi. Rashi is picking up on a tradition that begins already with Onkelos, that what Yaakov did was wise, it was smart, it was creative. He came up with an interesting, intelligent way to get Yitzchak to bless him without technically lying. And so, bottom line is, according to Rashi, and presumably according to Onkelos as well, Yaakov did not lie, and so what Yaakov did is completely ethical. He found a way without lying to get his father to give him the bracha which he deserved, and so the nevuah of Ravi Avod Sa'ir is fulfilled. The more worthy son gets the bracha, and he didn't lie. Ibn Ezra comes along, and Ibn Ezra is bothered by this. Ibn Ezra, we mentioned, a little bit younger than Rashi. He was approximately bar mitzvah when Rashi died. And Ibn Ezra says, come on, who are you guys kidding? When Yaakov says, Anochi Esav b'chorecha, we all know what it means. He says, come on, I know there are some people who say Yaakov didn't lie. Yesh omrim, chalila l'chazev hanavi. It's impossible. L'chazev means to say something untrue. Some people say it's impossible that a Navi would say something untrue, and therefore Yaakov didn't lie. And they explain, Anochi Masha Anochi, I am who I am, and Esav is your firstborn. Ibn Ezra also quotes another version of this, people who said that Yaakov said, Anochi quietly, benachat, sort of softly, like in a whisper, and then afterwards he said out loud, Esav bechorecha. So Yaakov comes in and says, I am Esav's your firstborn. And so all these people are basically trying to make it that Yaakov didn't exactly lie. Says Ibn Ezra, Ve'ela divrei ruach. That's a polite way of saying this is a bunch of nonsense. It's words of wind. It's empty words. Ibn Ezra thinks these people are wrong. That if you read the words Anochi Esav b'chorecha, and it looks and feels and smells like a lie, that's because it is a lie. So Ibn Ezra thinks that Yaakov lied here. This now raises another question. If he lied, does that mean he acted unethically? So in general, if you lie, that's not ethical. But there are cases where the right thing to do is to lie. We mentioned in class, there are extreme cases where everybody would agree. Right? The diplomats who lied and forged documents in World War II to get Jews out of Nazi Germany or Nazi-occupied Europe, they lied, but they obviously did a good thing. Now this is not as extreme as that. Yaakov is not saving anyone from imminent death and murder here, but could it be that Esav getting the bracha is such a catastrophe that Yaakov needed to do anything possible, including lying, to prevent that? And that is Ibn Ezra's view. So Ibn Ezra says, look, it's a bunch of nonsense to say that Yaakov didn't lie. Of course he lied, but that doesn't mean he did the wrong thing. And so if we look a little bit later, Ibn Ezra, he gives certain examples here of other Nevi'im who did things. The only one we mentioned in class is Avraham, right? Avraham says about Sarah, well, really, she's my sister. That's not true. Why is Avraham saying that? So he was saying that to protect Sarah. Now again, he thought he might be protecting her from death, but Ibn Ezra seems to be saying it's not just that. There are cases where to prevent a very bad situation, even a holy Navi has to lie, or feels he has no better choice than to lie. And so Yaakov and Rivka here believe it would be an absolute disaster, an absolute catastrophe for Esav to get the brachot, and therefore they have no choice but to lie. And even later, when Yitzchak describes what Yaakov did as mirma, ba'achicha b'mirma, Ibn Ezra says, mirma means lying, shalo diber emet. Yaakov did not speak the truth. And yet, Ibn Ezra still thinks what Yaakov did was the right thing in these circumstances. That apparently Yaakov and Rivka must have assumed that it wouldn't have worked to just talk to Yitzchak. And so they felt there was no better option here, no viable option other than to lie. And if they didn't lie, then Esav is going to wind up with a bracha, which would be a catastrophe. Now, even though he doesn't say this, again, we said in support of Ibn Ezra, perhaps the fact that Yitzchak ultimately blesses Yaakov afterwards shows that even Yitzchak who wanted to bless Esav and who described Yaakov's behavior as mirma, shalo diber emet, according to Ibn Ezra, even Yitzchak, who thinks that Yaakov lied, in the next parak he calls in Yaakov and gives him a bracha. An even better bracha, right? The Birkat Avraham. And so it seems like even Yitzchak acknowledges that ultimately Yaakov was more deserving, and so he's basically acknowledging that he understands why Yaakov lied to him and he forgives him for it. And so those were the two sort of classical approaches that we saw. Rashi and Onkelos saying Yaakov did the right thing and he didn't even lie technically. And then Ibn Ezra and certain other Meforshim like Ibn Ezra saying he did lie. It's true. In general, lying is bad. But in this case, just like certain other cases where you have no choice, in order to avert a complete disaster, tragedy, catastrophe, they had to lie. I then gave you this essay by Rav Yair Khan, where he challenges both these approaches. He says, look, why would it be such a catastrophe for Esav to get the bracha? Presumably we think it's a catastrophe because we know that Hashem thinks Yaakov is more worthy. Hashem told Rivka, Rav Yavod Sa'ir, which at its simplest meaning means that Esav would serve Yaakov. And so Hashem wants Yaakov to get the bracha, and therefore it would be terrible for Esav to get it. But says Rav Khan, isn't that Hashem's problem? He gives certain other examples from Tanakh that we didn't look at in detail inside, of people who wanted to do something wrong because they thought that by doing this thing wrong, they'd preserve Hashem's plan in the long term. There's a story about a king named Chizkiyahu who, according to the Gemara, didn't want to have kids because he knew his kid was going to be a Rasha. So he said, I don't want to have a kid who's going to be a Rasha. And the Navi told him, that's not your problem. You're obligated in the mitzvah of having children. If your kid becomes a Rasha later, that's between him and God. You don't have a right to outsmart God and get out of the mitzvah of having kids, because maybe someday one of those kids will be a bad person. And so here says Rav Khan, just because God has a plan for Yaakov to be the leader, who says that entitles Yaakov or Rivka to lie? Maybe they have to be honest, because in general the Torah requires of people to be honest, and Hashem will find a way for Yaakov to eventually come out on top if that's what's meant to be. And so Rav Khan then asked the question, is that just him, a rabbi living in the 21st century, who's bothered by this? Or do we see any earlier sources in Chazal or Meforshim that actually felt Yaakov may have done the wrong thing? And so there's one midrash that he quoted in his article that we didn't read inside in class that says when Mordechai yells out in pain over Haman's decree to kill the Jews, that yelling out parallels what happened in our parak over here, where Esav yelled out when he found that a loud, bitter scream, right? Kishmo Esav et divrei aviv, vaitzak tzaka gedola umara. Esav lets out this loud, bitter yell. It's almost the same language it's going to use by Mordechai to say vaitzak tzaka gedola umara. Mordechai lets out this loud yell, and so this midrash says that's punishment, what we call midah keneged midah. Yaakov tricked Yitzchak in a way that forced Esav to yell like this. Esav felt cheated, and so eventually one of Esav's descendants, one of Amalek's descendants, Haman, is going to make Mordechai have a similar scream. And so too, we read this midrash in class, from Midrash Tanchuma, where Yaakov gets cheated by Lavan, right? Lavan tricks him into marrying Leah instead of Rachel. So Yaakov's really angry. He says to Leah, why did you go along with that? Lama rimitoti, why did you cheat me? And she says back to him, Yaakov, you're asking me about cheating? V'ata lama rimita avicha, why did you cheat your father? You said Anochi Esav B'chorecha. That's not honest. You're asking me then, why did I cheat you? Didn't your father say Ba'achicha b'mirma? So this midrash does